What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So occasionally we'll talk about how games get canceled and we never hear about them, only for them to be revealed decades later at times. And in fact, that recently happened in an interview with Rockstar games for the Game Boy Advance and DS actually being outed, and I figured we would go over that here today. Also, we're going to be talking about a leak that's hit Microsoft. Yes, for another controller, but there is one interesting aspect that I wanted to go over, especially when it comes to that FTC leak and this new controller that seems to be set up for reveal here soon. And then we'll also be talking about Capcom, as they did respond to questions from investors around physical games and if they would be continuing to make them. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps it a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Concord. It's out next month, and I know things haven't gone well for the game so far in closed beta, and then somehow in open beta, numbers seem to actually go down a bit. But still, it seems like they're full speed ahead for that $40 release here in a month, and they actually went over a few other aspects here for launch, which includes the Battle Pass, or actually lack thereof. We can see this posted up over on their official account, where it asks, will there be a Battle Pass? It simply says Concord does not have a Battle Pass. We wanted to focus our attention on making Concord a rewarding and robust experience on day one, where just playing the game, leveling up your accounts and characters, and completing jobs yields meaningful rewards. It's actually a real shame that this game just isn't very interesting or very compelling for many people out there, as the numbers have shown, because it does appear that they are just going very straightforward with the multiplayer progression system here, where it sounds weird now, I know, you play the game and you unlock stuff. It's an incredible concept. Unfortunately, seems to be attached to Concord specifically at this point. Not that other Sony games going forward with live service won't follow this path, but it seems like right now Concord is on the ropes and they're just trying to figure out different ways maybe to set themselves apart by going back to more traditional aspects for unlocking stuff. Still though, I think that $40 price tag is a pretty big barrier to entry for many people, especially after looking around at, well, many free-to-play games that line up almost one-to-one with Concord at this point. Also, we do have a release date now for Shadows of the Damned Remastered. We had a full trailer that was released, and this game is coming out, well, it makes sense, on Halloween, October 31st, 2024. This was posted up over on Grasshopper Archives, of course, Suda51, and it is coming out on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, S, Xbox One, PC through Steam, and Nintendo Switch on Halloween. And this is a game that I kind of missed back in the day. Was it 2011, I think, on PS3 and Xbox 360. It was sort of in like the twilight year almost of those systems, as of course we were starting to look forward to the PS4 and the Xbox One around late 2011, 2012. But still, I am interested. The only issue here is it's coming out at the end of October, and there's already going to be a lot of stuff coming out around that time. So this might be a game that kind of gets put on the back burner or just gets overlooked a bit. But obviously, for people who have been hoping to hear about a remaster, and now we have it, and now we have that release date, they probably won't be missing that one. I will check it out when I get time at some point. Oh, and speaking of checking games out, we randomly had a demo that was released by Team Ninja. In fact, we can see this over on their official account. Download and play the free demo and carry your character and progress to the full game with Rise of the Ronin. And that demo is available right now. So the game came out, what, 4 months ago? And all of a sudden, it was like, hey, here's a demo. It seems odd to do it this late into after release, really, but they said so far sales for them have been good with Rise of the Ronin, so maybe this is just another way to kickstart sales once again by just having people try out the game, and if they like it, they can have their progress carry over when they buy the full game. So if you've been curious about this open world Team Ninja style game, I mean, you can grab the demo and try it for yourself. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a pair of games that were slated for Nintendo's handhelds, one in the early conceptual stage and the other actually completed, but both of them were completely canceled. And this is kind of a strange one, the fact that one is done and maybe even floating around out there. For the Warriors on the Game Boy Advance, this information comes way of Time Extension, as they did an entire interview, and we can see some of it here, where they say, while interviewing a former Rockstar Games employee who wants to remain anonymous. Not shocking, though, based on some of the information that was shared here. Time Extension's conversation switched over to canceled projects that they had knowledge of, which never saw the light of day. According to these sources, the Warriors would have used the same engine behind the Game Boy Advance port of Remedy Entertainment's Max Payne and was pretty much finished and ready for release before being canned in 2005. If you've never seen gameplay of Max Payne on the Game Boy Advance, it almost takes kind of this like isometric sort of view to it. I actually have played that, I think in different, there were different handheld videos I've done, and I know I played Max Payne in one of them just to show off a screen or kind of a mod for a Game Boy there, but it's definitely an interesting Game Boy Advance title, especially for a system or handheld that didn't necessarily have 3D capabilities as you would see with something like with the PSP, but they, of course, did their best there and tried to figure it out. But still, they say they actually know of a copy of the game that exists, but sadly, it doesn't seem like it will ever see a release due to the owner not being in a position to share it. They go on to theorize that, well, might have to do with Take-Two not being happy if that copy got out there. But from their source, they said, quote, "We were going for 4-player co-op using the link cable and stuff. We finished the game. It was actually fun to play, but there it sits, never to be released, because that's when the PSP was gaining momentum and we weren't really seeing good returns on Nintendo. Nintendo at the time didn't like promoting M-rated games," which, that actually kind of lines up then with the Game Boy Advance. "We were comfortable in Sony land, so we went with the Warriors Direct port on PSP, which actually was pretty good. I mean, I played the Warriors on the original Xbox back in the day. Actually, I think we had it on the original Xbox and the PS2. It was really depending on which friend's house I was at, right? But at that time, you could play, you could do 2 players with the Warriors, from what I remember, and we would sit down and play that for a while, and it was a lot of fun. But also it kind of had to do with the movie sort of coming back around into popularity, at least in my circle of friends at that time in high school in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004, somewhere in there. And so when we saw the game come out, it was really cool to be able to then also pick that up after checking out the movie, which came out 20-something years prior in 1979. But then check this out. They also mention another game. We had Bully on the DS. Right away, Chinatown Wars, we did Bully. The same thing, top down and everything, but it didn't make it too far. That's the one to me that's a real shame. Sure, it would have been fun to see this weird port of the Warriors where it had 4-player co-op through link cables and stuff. That great. But Bully on the DS, having to move over from the PS2, which when these games moved over from console to handheld, especially the DS or the Game Boy Advance, you essentially made a whole nother version of the game. And with the DS having 2 screens, that was an extremely creative time for the industry. So I'm really curious what plans they had maybe for Bully to utilize both screens, because I think there's a lot of potential there. But yeah, 2 Rockstar games. One pretty much finished with the Warriors on the Game Boy Advance, maybe even floating around out there now and could someday leak online. The other one, they thought about it and then kind of shelved them. So ashamed to hear that. Would like to see more or hear more about what their plans were for Bully. I would like to see that Warriors copy someday leak out there online. Next up, let's stick with Rockstar and Grand Theft Auto 6. Of course, we're looking forward to that releasing next year, and it's highly anticipated. Obviously, we saw what happened when the trailer leaked and then just got released right afterwards. I mean, hundreds of millions of views, just wild, wild stuff there in that week. But we're basically going into what we assume will be the biggest video game release in history. Well, with that comes high expectations. And in fact, in a recent podcast, we actually had a former Rockstar developer talk about this a bit. We can see this posted up. This is over on Dexerto, and they say the former Rockstar developer appeared in an interview with YouTuber San Play, talk about game development and GTA 6, saying, quote, "I don't think it's going to be wildly different from GTA 5. I think people might be a little disappointed on the first day, but it's still going to be the best game out there." They went on to say there's some rumors about creating new technology having to do with animation, AI, and all that stuff. "I think it's time for a revolution where animation is more so AI-driven and physics-driven. If anyone is going to make that step, it's gonna be Rockstar." Well, we did see the visuals and sure the movement and stuff in the initial trailer, and it looked very, very impressive. So much so people were trying to figure out, is this real time? Is this pre-rendered? What are we looking at here? And when you hear that conversation as somebody developing the game, you're onto something there. And I do think GTA 6 is gonna come out and probably set that standard for open world games once again. And a lot of that has to do with just the expectations being so high and Take-Two knowing that they have to get it right. And I mean, it's been a long time since Grand Theft Auto, last mainline Grand Theft Auto game came out. Grand Theft Auto 5 was on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 a month before the PS4 and the Xbox One came out in 2013. That's absolutely ridiculous to think about right now, and we've had multiple releases of GTA 5, obviously, through different generations, and now we're finally coming up to GTA 6. So, on one hand, it probably won't be able to live up to expectations because I don't think an 11 out of 10 game probably would live up to some of the expectations people are currently setting, but I think GTA 6, just based on the amount of money that's being thrown at it, the amount of development time, the amount of talent being put behind it, yeah, it's probably going to be a very good game. Will it be that generational release? I mean, it's got a shot at it, but I also don't think it's necessarily going to be able to meet every single expectation that's put out there. Now, that's a ton of pressure to put on one game, but nonetheless, I think it will come out, and I think people will get a kick out of it. And the thing that I'm now really curious about is, what do they do with Grand Theft Auto Online? Because I think that is going to be a major focus, and will probably make or break their release for Grand Theft Auto overall, because that's something they will then hang their hat on for the next decade plus, as we saw with GTA 5. Next up, let's talk about a leak that's now hit Xbox. Once again, this coming from D-Labs, who has their finger on the pulse for not only early game releases through things like the PlayStation Network, but also Xbox controllers. They seem to call out every single one of these a week or so before it happens, and it looks like they're doing that once again. But this one's kind of interesting because we're sort of in this time period where we're expecting another controller to be announced from Microsoft. Let's take a look here, this though over on D-Labs, where they say the Sky Cypher controller, it will indeed be a blue controller, slightly transparent look like that Forza Horizon 5 controller that came out a few years ago in 2021. It is expected to be announced on July 31st, 2024, so look forward to that next week. The release date of the controller remains unclear on our side. Indeed, we have several candidate dates, and the most likely would be for August 13th, 2024, so a couple of weeks after they make the announcement. It would then be shipping out and then releasing into stores. The thing that they are kind of questioning now, and this makes sense, is that haptic feedback. So this is up in the air because it was expected to be included in that Sebel controller, which was leaked with the FTC a little while ago, right? And we saw not only that Brooklyn all-digital Xbox, but this controller they were going to use to refresh the current Xbox controller that is still very, very similar to the Xbox One controller. Sebel was going to add in the big one that I was looking at, outside of like the gyros in there. The big one was going to be that advanced haptic feedback that is currently part of the Switch controllers, as well as the PlayStation 5 DualSense. The Xbox is still using like the older rumble motor technology that we had back even with like the PS2 and the original Xbox. People were hoping that they would make the move to advanced haptic feedback. They have not yet, but kind of expected now maybe with Sebel, and because this controller, this blue controller, is falling in line with when we were expecting Sebel to release based on Microsoft's own documents to the FTC. Every controller announcement now is like, okay, is that going to have some sort of change to the rumble technology? And that's sort of where we are now, is just waiting to see if Microsoft's going to make that announcement. I don't necessarily think it's going to be, though, with a controller like this that is very clearly just kind of a themed controller. I think when they do make that announcement, it is going to be a departure from the current Xbox controller. Might have a slightly different shape to it. They might have an extra button or two there, but something to completely differentiate it from the current Xbox Series controller. So no, I'm not expecting it here, but I wouldn't be shocked if we see it ahead of their next generation system, mostly because they really don't have a problem going between generations with basically the same controller. Like, they don't revamp the entirety of their controller like we saw Sony do and like we've seen Nintendo do over and over again. So they could basically announce Sebel whenever they want and then just carry it over to whatever their next generation system is shaping up to be, and we're kind of expecting that here by the end of 2026, maybe 2027 at the latest. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Capcom answering questions with investors. One, though, came up around physical media and if Capcom would continue down that path for their games. And there is a reason why this was asked. First, though, let's take a look at Capcom's response here. This was transcribed by VGC. Again, this for their 45th ordinary general shareholder meeting. They responded saying, given that a significant number of end users demand physical games, we do not expect to eliminate physical products. Now, why was this asked? Well, during the 2023 financial year, Capcom announced that 90.1%, that's right, I say 90.1% of its sales were for digital titles, and it forecasts that those will reach over 93% during the current financial year that they are in. So eventually you get close enough to 100% that you just call it and go, well, I guess that's it. I mean, it's just, is it worth the logistics and the expense of having these pressed discs that we send out there? We can't even fit everything on a disc now, as we're seeing with many titles that come out, and you just put the disc in and have to download half the game or something. So Capcom does seem to be a company that will be hanging on as long as they can, right? And part of that will obviously be relying on Nintendo's path forward, because I think Capcom will become more reliant even on Nintendo's next system, as it should be more capable and able to line up with some of Capcom's big releases, especially with Resident Evil. And let's face it, Monster Hunter Wilds, as soon as Nintendo's next system comes out, I wouldn't be shocked if Monster Hunter Wilds was almost right there, ready to go. Maybe a little later, obviously, as we're expected to come out months after Nintendo's system does. But still, I think that will make the jump at some point, and seems like Nintendo, yes, will be keeping physical media through way of cartridges. But you see what's happening with Microsoft right now, where they are definitely making the push to cloud and digital. And Sony, while I think they will keep physical media around for next generation, even they seem to be wavering a bit with the detachable disc drive, and we'll see how they handle the PlayStation 5 Pro. But at least for now, Capcom, they're sticking with it. How much longer, though? Well, that really comes down to the platform holders around them at this time, and we see how they are starting to trend more and more towards digital. And Capcom, 93% this fiscal year. What's going to happen next and the one after that? Once you get to past 95%, is it worth shipping physical media? Well, at least for me, I think it is, but I'm also not the one paying out a lot of the money to make those discs. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, do you buy special edition controllers? Well, 59% say no, I only get regular controllers as I need them. Hey, but 34% say they buy one or two per generation. Maybe there's a franchise you really like and a cool controller comes out, you pick it up. And then 7% just say, I collect several of them. And I've seen people show off like their controller collection. A lot of it is the Xbox, yes, because Xbox, they really like making controllers. They are constantly shipping new controllers, different colors, different themes, sometimes going along with games, other times just not. So I guess at least in that case, there are plenty of different special editions or different editions, different color schemes to choose from, or you can just make your own through their design labs. I will say it's definitely better to have just choices or more choice in general than not. Like, I do think looking at something like the consoles, they should do more work with that, because they do the sleeve that you wrap around it. But a lot of times they'll show off a console that looks really cool, special edition, and it's just for some sort of competition. That is where I would like them to maybe work towards for the next generation, is looking more and more into special edition systems to go along with their big releases. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Chandler, who says, the Ubisoft thing just feels like manufactured controversy. I'm not even a fan, but Assassin's Creed has always seemed to play with history. Similar to Doctor Who, where it's historically accurate, but then slips in made-up randomness. Yeah, Assassin's Creed definitely, they definitely play around with history. It's very, very loosely. It is definitely historical fiction. But I think when you're saying, okay, so you're saying manufactured controversy, online there are definitely many outlets and people, social media and stuff, that are definitely trying to amp this up to 11, and a lot of it does have to do with engagement and that sort of stuff, as it does work. You see it online a lot. There's so much engagement and conversation around this stuff, and like 80% of the people weren't going to buy Assassin's Creed are not buying it now. And at times, I question if they're just buying any games in general or playing any of them. But in this case, would Ubisoft be manufacturing it themselves? I've seen that. Like, that theory floated. It's not working if that was the case. I'm sure no one's really talking about things like not the full game not coming on the disc. You have to download like half the game and then you can play it offline. No one's really talking about missions and content being locked behind the Ultimate Edition that is significantly more expensive. There will be probably microtransactions involved. There's a lot of Ubisoft annoyances that are not at all in the spotlight right now, because everyone wants to talk about everything else around the game that really doesn't mean much to the game itself. So look, if Ubisoft is doing this on purpose, it's not working. Their stock price is down majorly, and that's just because Assassin's Creed is a massive cash cow for them. Assassin's Creed Valhalla made over $1 billion for them. Will Assassin's Creed Shadows get there? Right now, I'm not really expecting it to. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Xbox's leaked controller? Do you think we're randomly gonna have them announce a next generation controller using advanced haptic feedback? Then also, what about Capcom? Sticking with physical media, but for how long? And then what about those canceled Rockstar games that would have been going to the Game Boy Advance or the DS with Bully? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.